Hello and welcome to another episode of Back to Britpop. It's me, Chris. On this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Jim McCulloch. Jim talks about all his musical projects to date, from BMX Bandits, Soup Dragons, Superstar, Snow Goose, and we also talk about the writing and recording of his first debut album, When I Mean What I Say, which came out fairly recently. It's a lovely chat, and I was very grateful for Jim for giving up his time for me. As per usual, I'll be back at the end of the interview to talk about all the ways that you can support this podcast. But in the meantime, here's Jim. Welcome to the podcast, Jim McCulloch. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks for asking me.
Whereabouts in the world are you?
I'm in Glasgow, just in the west end of Glasgow.
And I always ask this question. I probably should stop asking it now because it is becoming tedious. But how has the last 18 months been for you?
Pretty wild, just like everybody else. You know, I think as musicians, we are very conscious of the fact that we've not been able to perform, you know, and play. I mean, we can certainly record and write, but the actual performance thing it's been on the, you know, it's been like a foreign country, you know. But I think we're beginning to see it opening up again now, so which is great news.
Well, you've been able to put an album out as well, a solo album, your first, is that right?
That's right, yeah. I mean, it's funny because the recording of that was all done just before that fateful March, you know, the lockdown. I'd finished all the work the winter before, so that was all ready to go and it was all in place. But then, you know, trying to get some shows to put around it, but just was not an option, you know. But yeah, I was very lucky to have all that work done beforehand.
And your approach to recording this album, I mean, in terms of all the other sort of projects that you've done since you kind of became a full-time musician, yeah. I mean, this was quite a big step for you, I guess, to become front and center. I mean, what was that transition like for you? Was it easy?
Well, it was a gradual realization, you know, over decades, I guess, that really this is something that I wanted to do, and gradually got myself to the position that, you know, if I'm going to call myself an artist, I got to do it the way I want to do it, you know. And so I made the decision, went back to university, I got a degree, and the music and all the songs for this album kind of sprung out of that decision. So everything's kind of joined, you know, in a bit. It's like taking, obviously I've been playing guitar and music since the 80s, but it took me to like 2020 to actually, you know, stand in front of the spotlight and say, well, this is actually me. This is I'm not hiding behind anybody else now. This is me playing and doing what I want to do.
And your approach to recording would you say, is pretty traditional in the fact that you sit and record with guitar and vocal and then layer thereafter?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, to a point, it's actually maybe the process of the way I did it was probably too traditional, because I recorded the guitar and the vocals at the same time, which if you've ever spoke to a sound engineer or anybody that works in a recording studio, it's not a good move, because you can't go back and you know, fix any mistakes, because it'll affect everything else that you've done. So I was really aiming to get everything done in the one take, the one performance, and it was all or nothing. So you're getting a lot of, you know, fluffs and wee mistakes and things that maybe, you know, the casual listener wouldn't notice, but I know it's there. But I really did want to capture the performance, and yeah, I think you get that, plus, you know, all the wee warts and all end of it as well.
Yeah, it's a really raw and almost live approach to it, isn't it? That recording process isn't a digital age. Everyone is so conscious that you would want to go back and do overdubs and, you know, even play with the vocal track and stuff.
It's taken away the safety net, you know. It's like, really, this is the one we're going from the start, we're going to the finish, and this is what we're doing, you know. I mean maybe take the song, record it maybe about 4 times, you know, and then just pick the best overall performance. And because you can't really, as we were, you know, say, you can't edit out bits in here and change the guitar there or overdubs, because it's all done at the same time. Yeah. It's scary.
And in terms of lyrics, you've been writing songs for many years, but how does this solo material differ? Are you coming from another place in terms of what you're writing about?
Yeah, I mean, in the past, I mean, I've obviously been just writing songs for myself, or writing songs for fun, or writing songs for other performers to sing. But this was quite specifically a challenge that was set by the university. You know, it's like I was doing a master's degree basically, and at the end of that, I had to have an album of songs, and it was entirely up to me what it was going to be about and all that kind of thing, you know. But so I had to make like kind of a lot of artistic decisions quite early on in the process about this is what it's going to be. And then when I was actually in the process of writing them, I had to kind of document the process. So that was quite a forensic way of doing it and quite unnerving, because it's not something you think about when you're actually normally writing, you know, the process, the actual songwriting process in itself. So yeah, it was a bit quite intense, but it added a certain depth to it, I think, that I maybe wasn't expecting. So I'm quite grateful that I had that extra layer of pressure.
And your voice, do you think can be heard? So are you pleased with the way, that your voice is being heard on this record?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I'm always, I mean, like most people, I think when they hear themselves singing or talking, it's a bit strange. I've never classed myself as a singer, but I think somebody once said to me, it's like, well, you've lived your life, you've got all that experience, and it's your words. So your character's going to come out and how you sing. So yeah, I mean, it is what it is now. I mean, I'm perfectly resigned to the fact that I'm not going to be a singer like Todd Rundgren or whoever. You know, I'm just me, and that's what you get. You know, this album's a lot to do with honesty. So it is kind of laying myself bare, and what you see is what you get.
When you think about your sort of formative years then with music, how did you gravitate towards the guitar, and was it an instrument you kind of fell in love with at an early age?
I guess so. Back maybe I self-taught myself with, I was maybe 13, 14. Always loved music. There was always music on in the house. My mum played the piano. I played a wee bit of clarinet at school and was always involved in the music department or whatever, you know. But then I discovered like the Beatles and, you know, just like super melodic music like that. And then I realised I wanted to play the guitar because I was a big Elvis fan. So yeah, it was just that iconic guitar thing, you know, like learning to play in the bedroom, listening to music, pressing pause and trying to work out what the chords were. And then somebody got me a Beatles songbook for a Christmas, and yeah, I just went through it. And as soon as I heard a new song, I would just try and pick it apart. So I obviously had a good ear for music, but it's just developing that and nurturing it, you know. So yeah, it was just kind of voyage that I'm still on, really.
It never really ends, does it? It's kind of the influence.
You can always go back as well, and you rediscover the old songs, you know, and you hear them fresh again. You know, it's always a revelation.
You're so connected, Jim, with so many bands and artists. I mean, the most obvious one, or maybe not. Well, for me, and maybe some of the listeners would be the BMX Bandits, which would just say wouldn't be your first band, but it was the band that kind of I would have been sort of the biggest project, so to speak, in those early sort of 80s and 90s. Yeah.
I think before that, the BMX Bandits started, we were like 18, 19 years of age. So we were just out of school. And the only other sort of bands we'd played in were just like school bands, you know, as you do. And it was just like the process of us that sort of looking out of the boundaries of the wee town that we lived in. We lived in a place called Motherwell, which was the next stop on the train line to Bellshill, which was another 3 stops from Glasgow. And we were always looking down that track, you know, Glasgow being the place to be, because that's where good music was coming from at that time. And we used to go busking, as I said. And so the guys from Motherwell would get on the train, and then the guys from Bellshill would get on the train. And then gradually we'd just, you know, start to talk to each other because we recognised, you know, kindred spirits. And yeah, just made connections, casual connections that lasted a lifetime, you know. So it's kind of, yeah, it's thinking about it like that. It's like the smallest decisions become like lifelong, you know, effects. It's very strange.
What do you think you you learnt in those formative years with the BMX Bandits? Did it shape any of your kind of career aspirations?
I think to a point, I think it gave us that, instilled that ethos of like anything is possible. You don't, there are no rules. We were doing cover versions of Jacques Brel songs. We were doing Swell Maps songs, and everything in between. And we realised there is nothing off limits, and we were getting reactions, not very extreme reactions. People either loved it or hated it, and not just the obvious things. Maybe a lot of folk couldn't handle Douglas's onstage persona, or they couldn't handle what they perceived as the twee aspect of it all. It was confrontational, especially where we were brought up in Motherwell and Bellshill. It was very much the absolute. It was a red rag to a bull to a lot of people that were walking the streets. You'd have to walk with one eye behind you because you were going to get chased, you were going to get beat up. So yeah, it was confrontational, and we realised that we could go on stage and we could do that, and and people would react. So that was definitely a part of it. And that, once again, there are no rules, so we did what we wanted to do.
The Soup Dragons was the next sort of big project that kind of, would you say, catapulted you into sort of a different sort of world of live music and recording?
Yeah, I would say so. It's hard to compartmentalize them because they did kind of both start at the same time, to an extent, and then the Soup Dragons thing became more national. I think maybe they get picked up by a London management company called Big Life, run by a guy called Jazz Summers, in association with a guy called Tim Parry, and they had really, really high powered connections. Jazz Summers used to be one of the managers of Wham, and they were just looking for new projects, and they saw one of the first Soup Dragons videos, I think, on the chart show, and they got in contact after that, and it was just this other layer that we had never experienced before. It's just like a machine behind the band, and it started off at that the same level as the BMX Bandits, but then it gradually went off in a completely different direction. Became a bit more serious, and once there was sort of money involved in it, so there was budgets for videos, there was budgets for tours. They weren't big tours, they weren't big videos, but it was much more than we'd ever experienced before. It was all in the space of a couple of years. So
what was it, do you think, that caught the imagination then about that band?
I think there's a lot of visual elements involved in that band, because we had Ross, the drummer, hadn't played the drums before, but he was at art school, and he had this huge visual influence on the band. And I think just like the four individuals in the band, like Sushil and Sean, and everybody had very specific perspectives on music and what they would bring to it, because Ross had never drummed before. Sushil hadn't really particularly played the bass before, and I was a self-taught guitarist, and Sean was a self-taught guitarist as well. And it was just that kind of unique combination of circumstances, and Sean was pretty driven. He was really wanting to make a success of this, and just they all wanted to get out of Motherwell, Bellshill, and Glasgow, and then and why stop there? Scotland, UK, the world. So and we had the wherewithal to do it.
Those early kind of rehearsals and songwriting sessions that you were doing, was there a moment where you thought, crikey, this is different, this is something that could potentially work?
Possibly, yeah. At the time we were rehearsing quite a lot. We were rehearsing maybe 3 or 4 nights a week, and the sort of turnover of material was quite breathtaking. Sean was writing a lot of songs, and quite rejigging old songs as well. So there was always this turnover of material, And if we were playing a concert, it was very short and sharp, so we were playing maybe 7 or 8 tracks at the most. So we were always trying to keep it interesting for us. I guess it was just that all these ideas and trying to get them down. It's funny. It was like a roller coaster. It really was.
Well, you went to the States as well. You had some success there, which is another extremely like a tough one, a tough break. Is it true what they say in terms of touring America? Was it just a slog, or did you find it quite good?
I think, it was a combination. I mean, when we did it a few times on our own, and then we did it a couple of times with INXS, the Australian band, and it was a different level. We were on a stadium tour with them, which was completely different to the way we had been doing it, and we were just trying to start off, breaking in America by playing like 200 capacity venues, and even just in New York State, there's a lot of them. So we had, we were playing and playing and playing. But we were loving the iconography and going on the road, and that whole going to America and breaking America thing was very big in our minds, because a lot of the music we loved obviously was American, and going to actually visit these cities was definitely fulfilling the dream and ticking a lot of boxes for us. So that there was still a lot of excitement there about just actually being in America and playing in a band and getting paid for it. That was pretty much what all we were looking for.
Were you coping with it all at the time? Were you just going with the flow, or were you finding it quite stressful to just come up with new songs and and also just to keep the cogs turning and whirling? I mean, what was it like?
Yes, that is definitely a balancing act. It's very difficult, to maintain that. Because we were in America, then our UK profile really dipped, and we were very conscious of that, because we were just like music fans. We were reading the NME or the Melody Maker, and we were getting a lot of bad press at that time, and we're like, what's happening? Couldn't really work out why, and then we were just worried about what was happening in the UK. But then the American record company was saying, don't worry about it, you're here now, focus on America, and so but we had to kind of do that, and that maybe worked not in our favour at the time, so it's just a balancing act. It's really hard to get right, I think. But we did what we did. We were only 23, 24 years old at this point, and we weren't that far away from where we started, really.
The Soup Dragons kind of naturally, would you say, came to an end in itself? Was there a moment when you guys sort of thought, okay, this is something that we need to probably shelve for now?
Yeah, I think we'd all reached the point. I think we'd been on the road in America for a couple of years, and we were all wanting to. We'd all bought probably 4-track Porter studios, and we all wanted to start breaking out of our positions, as it were, in the band, and do our own thing. And I think we just sort of thought, well, we want to do our own thing now, and that was the first step in everybody doing, growing up and moving away from each other, because 5 or 6 years I think we'd been together, and that's a long apprenticeship, and that's what it was, it really was. It was just like it's hitting the ground running, and then you want to start breaking out and expressing yourself your own terms, after a while.
There wasn't a stage for you where you were worried about the future. You just were embracing the fact that you could now be free to pursue your own sound.
Yeah, I mean, we weren't particularly worried about the future, because we didn't really have a plan in that sense, But we're all still pretty young and no, family or commitments as such. So, there wasn't really any big financial dimension to us making that decision. We just wanted to keep things exciting and start making our own music.
And so what came next? Was it, I'm trying to figure out whether you would have reconnected with Joe from BMX Bandits at this point.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really, we'd always been friends throughout this whole point, I think Joe and I were out one night in Glasgow at the art school or somewhere, and Joe just said, well, do you fancy, now that you've left the Soup Dragons, do you fancy joining up with me and Superstar, and moving things forward and that? So I said, yeah, no problem. I'm quite happy to do that. So that's what we did.
What's your memories of Superstar? They were, for me, a great and fantastic band, and I still rate their music very highly. And, but a different approach, I'm guessing, as well, to what you've been doing, and a different sound.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we were. I mean, I was closely involved in working with Joe, all through the Groovy Little Numbers and the first the creation Superstar stuff. So I was involved in all that, and so I was always aware of what it was doing and how it was all developing. And I mean, Joe and I had been best friends since high school, and we kind of knew each other, inside out, back to front. So we had pretty good idea of what Joe was wanting to do. So yeah, it was just trying to bring it to that kind of beautiful power pop West Coast harmony thing, and try and bring it up to date, and just with the 3-part harmonies, and just really, really melodic pop music, and it's hard for that kind of thing to break through when you're it's just on the tail end of the grunge, everything's kind of doom and gloom, and then these ray of sunshine trying to pop out over the horizon, but it was out of time, but it still sounds timeless to me, and it's some beautiful songs recorded.
Yeah, well, I was talking to Joe about the Rod Stewart cover, and even I could completely get on board with that. I mean, we were talking about how that must have felt for him, and what it was like to hear it, and I think it's a great version.
Yeah, it's bizarre. As soon as when the tape arrived with us, we were sitting in a tour bus and didn't really want to put it on and listen to it, but it did eventually. So then we couldn't stop listening to it, because it also added like a middle 8 to it.
Yeah.
I was just like, what is this? But it exists in its own wee world, and you have to take it as a compliment, Of all the songs, he must have been presented with hundreds of songs, and he chose that one. So yeah, fair play to the man.
So with Green Peppers and Snow Goose, those two projects, and tell me a bit about Snow Goose and how you kind of formed that band. And you weren't the singer in that band, but you did provide sort of backing vocals and stuff.
Yeah, well, that kind of grew out of the last Green Peppers album. There was a trio of Green Peppers albums, and the third one I wanted to use like female singers, and I had a few great singers lined up, but then my friend Dave McGowan, he said, well, I've got a friend who's a singer. She's not really got any kind of profile as such, she hasn't really sung outside the house as far as he's aware, but she's got this great voice, so I said, well, just send me over a demo or just a recording, and let me hear Anna sing. And it was a version of Only Love Can Break Your Heart, Neil Young's song, and it was just her singing it, with no backing, and it was just like a voice from the gods, and I was like, this is unbelievable. And she came down to the studio and she sang the songs for me on the Green Peppers album, and from then I thought to myself, well, that I want to write a record for this with this voice for Anna to sing. And so I hooked up with Dave McGowan and Anna, and we kind of worked our way in, around a few live shows just as a trio. Dave was playing double bass and Anna was singing, I was playing acoustic, and it was quite a rootsy thing, a folky thing. And then I just kind of wrote an album of songs for her to sing, and it was just because she's got that kind of natural English folk voice. It wasn't difficult for me as a songwriter and as a music lover to get in, to hook myself into that world, because I'd always been a huge fan of like the Byrds and folk rock in general, and acoustic music. So all these different things that were all bubbling away in my background all sort of kind of came together with Anna singing on top of it, and it was like it became like the most natural thing in the world, and it just blossomed from there.
And do you think, Jim, then that when things start to get back to normal, you'll start to pursue like doing gigs and promoting the albums that you've done so far in a live setting?
I would like to think so, yeah. I mean, we've done a couple of shows, a handful of shows really as Snow Goose, but when we have played, the reaction has been outstanding. You know, people just feed off the band. I mean, and his voice. And we've played. I mean, the beauty of it is we can play as a duo. You know, just that'll be a very stripped down guitar and vocals, but we can also play as a full electric band. You know, we pull in a few favours, get these great musicians to play with us, and it sounds phenomenal. So yeah, I mean, as soon as we can all get together, and Anna, added complication, lives in England, I live in Scotland, which doesn't help either. But you know, when we want something to work, we make it work. And you know, we've got a new album currently in the process of being recorded. It's written and all the backing tracks are done. So we're just waiting to finish that, and from then, hopefully, fingers crossed, we can get out and play some more live shows.
Oh, well, I look forward to hearing it, Jim. As I say, the music that you're making is great, and I just say it's really connected with me in terms of the sound, and it's something that I really love to listen to anyway. And I hadn't, you know, prior to this podcast, it's been an eye opener because obviously I'm reconnecting with bands I was listening to in the 90s, but then you forget actually that people are doing amazing and fantastic work now, and that's what's been really great about doing it and reconnecting with people. Well, I'll let you go, and I say thanks ever so much, Jim, for joining me and talking about almost like a potted history of yourself. You could pretty much do a podcast series on your own.
Yeah. I have yet to cross that bridge, but yeah, I certainly could.
Take care. Right. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Big thank you to Jim for joining me on the podcast. It was an absolute pleasure to speak to him about all his musical projects to date. I've put links to all Jim's projects in the show notes for the episode, and you really must check out some of the stuff he's been doing recently. It's absolutely sublime. Okay, so this is the part of the podcast where I talk about all the ways in which you can support it. And those of you who listen every week will know this is kind of like some sort of weird pleading ritual that I do. But I will soldier on. So there's 3 things you can do, really. If you haven't done already, please go to social media and give me a follow, interact with me there, let me know you're listening. It's really nice to hear from you. So just search for Back to Britpop on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. The other way you can support me is by buying me a virtual coffee. It's a small financial donation essentially, and it will just help me run this podcast because I do everything on my own without support from a network or advertising. If you want to advertise on the podcast, hit me up, by the way. The last thing you can do, which really helps, is write reviews and leave ratings on the devices that you're listening to the podcast on. So Apple is a really good one, and also Google, Podbean, Spotify. I think on all those platforms you can leave a star rating. If you can do that, that's fantastic. Also, writing little reviews as well really helps, and I'd love to get that feedback from you. That's it for this episode. Hopefully I'll be back next week with another one. In the meantime, take care.